Mm.
Welcome to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. Today's Hot Off the Press is Pride related. Before we get started, though, let's go around the room, have everyone introduce themselves, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Sam.
Oh boy, I always love to go first. I'm Sam Burns. I write mostly paranormal, but any kind of fantasy really, and everything LGBT related. Usually work lately with my partner, WM Fox, who is not here tonight, so who knows what's going to come out of my mouth. Hopefully nothing bad.
All right, perfect. Frank.
Hi, I'm Frank W. Butterfield, and I write historical fiction that is all about gay couples and how they lived in the 40s and 50s, 60s, and moving forward. I have 3 series that are currently running, and I'm just really glad to be here.
All right, thank you. Jacki.
I write various contemporary paranormal gay romance novels. I have a little bit of everything, to be honest.
All right. Shane?
Yeah, my name is Shane Morton. I write a little all over the place. Um, I just write what I want to write at the time I write it. I write drag queen mysteries, gay romance with a couple different series, Point Pleasant series and the Bluegrass Boys. My mystery series right now is Drag Queen Detective. I write YA. I write general LGBT fiction. And I also write darker, more a blend of horror, sci-fi under the name Sean Asensall.
Perfect. And finally, AJ.
So I'm AJ Sherwood. I write kind of like Shane does, a little bit of everything. I do paranormal, urban fantasy, high fantasy. I'm dabbling in contemporary this year. I've had a plot bunny take over my brain. And I sometimes will write with a co-author, Jocelyn Drake. We have an urban fantasy series called the Scales and Spells series that we do together. But I'm kind of all over the place, just whatever strikes my fancy.
All right.
More fun that way, right?
Yeah, it's more fun.
So my first question, I'll go ahead and start with you, Frank. Tell us about your new release, kind of the idea, where it came from.
Well, I've got a couple of new releases I want to talk about. This book right here, The Biker Who Got Bumped Off, actually has been out for a little while. It's set here in Daytona Beach, which is where I live. It takes place in 1948 during the racing of the Daytona 200, which is now generally called Bike Week, but then was more like Bike Weekend. It's a murder that happens during or over the weekend of the race, and all of the suspects, everybody involved, are gay. There's the attorney, who's the main character, Tom, and his boyfriend, Ronnie, who's his private detective. So they're kind of like Perry Mason at the beach. And the person who's murdered is a member of one of 2 kind of gay biker gangs. They're all guys who were in the war together and have, got their used Harleys from the government and just got onto the road. And so the book itself goes through, it's a legal procedural more than anything else. But a lot of what it is about is Tom trying to hide the fact of what really actually happened while also trying to figure out what really actually happened, because it's not real clear. So it's very convoluted in that fun sort of way. So at the end of the story, because it's 1948 and it's Florida, there's an execution. And the other book, and I don't have it printed, so I don't have an image to show, is set in my contemporary series. And that book is called Silly Little Love Songs. And the Ronnie, who was the private detective in this book, is still alive. He's 104, going on like 17. And he wants Whit and Eddie, who are the main characters in this series, to figure out, who really actually committed the murder back in 48. And of course, it's what I get to do in that story is I get to document how difficult it is to figure that stuff out. And which was part of my 2-year journey to write this book. And I don't write books in more than like 3 weeks. So that was a big labor. So anyway, they do a lot of talking to really people in their 90s and early hundreds, all these gay men who are the ones who are still alive from that group. And in the end, figure out who it really was. So it's a lot of fun. It's rich with gay history, particularly in the contemporary book. There's a lot of conversation about what happened between the 40s and now with some of the people they're interviewing. And anyway, I think both books are great fun and they're great summer reads. So
where did the idea come from to join the books?
Well, it's funny because I started this book at about the time I started the Whit and Eddie series. And when I realized that Ronnie would still be alive, it just came to me to like have him walking around Daytona Beach, looking at things like, I remember when, and like being kind of vague, and then finally having an aha moment that he's concerned about what happened during that trial. But I hadn't written this book yet. So what was fun was that all the little things that Ronnie says throughout the Whit and Eddie books, over 5 books, I had to make sure to incorporate in this book, which had its own challenges because I wasn't completely consistent. And if anybody finds those little inconsistencies, please send me a note and I'll send you an Amazon card. Anyway, that's how it came about. It's just more than anything, I got to explore, just 70 years of gay life, and put it all kind of together in one place, which is generally what I'm doing anyway. But in this place, it's like it all gets bound together, which is a lot of fun.
Jacki, what about your release?
My latest one is the second book in my Heart Security. It's a bodyguard series. It is called Shielding the Superstar. And it is just a really fun story. It's about a country music star who comes out and his manager decides he needs to have a bodyguard because he thinks that, someone is probably going to try to get some kind of revenge on him because he's ruined their lives by flipping their world upside down. And he thinks it's pretty stupid, but he agrees. And so then I've got the bodyguard and him, and it's just a lot of fun. I really liked it. I got to blow stuff up, which I always like to do. In the first bodyguard book, we tried to burn someone alive. That was also fun. So, that's a little bit different from my normal. Most of my stuff is really light and sweet and fluffy, which I've been told I can't say anymore since I tried to burn someone alive. But,
You burned them very sweetly. I'm just saying.
It was very sweet. Well, he got rescued very sweetly. There we go. But anyway, so they're a little bit different than my normal, but they're a lot of fun. So.
And where did the idea come for the series?
I'm from Texas, and country music is a big deal here. And I love country music, but it is rather homophobic and a little bit misogynistic and a little hard to take if you're not listening to the right people. And when Ty Herndon came out a few years ago, it really kind of shocked a lot of people. And then he redid a couple of his songs so that they were pronoun appropriate. And I was just listening to those on repeat over and over and over. And I got to thinking about, there were stories about people using his CDs for shotgun practice, where they like shoot the discs up in the air and just stories like that got me to thinking about, that really is truly career ending as a country musician to come out. And I thought, what would that be like? So that's kind of where the whole thing came from.
All right. Shane, how about you?
My last release came out yesterday, and it's called Himbo's Homicide and Heels. and it's book 3 in the Drag Queen Detective series. And it is drag queen Victor Summers is actually a retired hairdresser, but he has 3 personalities. He has the drag queen Raven Ravon that works at the local club once a week as the MC. And then he has a secret personality that is Vicky Dean, which was a character he created as a pen name just to submit a mystery novel into the publisher, because he felt like if he got rejected, it would happen to someone else. Well, he didn't get rejected, and the book became really huge. And then his second book became really huge. And in the third book, he's actually taking a helicopter into the Northern California mountains during right before a blizzard, as they discover when they're coming in, to meet a Hollywood producer to possibly sell the rights to the first book for a film. And then what happens is, of course, a dead body turns up, and Vicky Dean and Sheriff Hottie and her 2 friends, Corey and Jensen, are having to solve the murder and get everyone out alive. And the reason I thought of, I mean, the way that Drag Queen Detective came about is probably the stupidest thing in the entire world. I watch a lot of TV, and I was watching Murder, She Wrote, and because I love Murder, She Wrote. Angela Lansbury is like one of my goddesses, right? And I'm watching it, I'm having a great time, and I'm like, oh, RuPaul's Drag Race just came on. I forgot. So I flip it, I watch RuPaul's Drag Race, I get up to pour myself a bourbon, and I'm like, oh, that's fabulous. That's a great idea. And I sat down immediately and started planning out the first book. And it's snarky and witty and sassy and everything you would expect Murder, She Wrote with a drag queen to be.
All right.
And that's it.
Perfect. AJ.
So I have 2 that recently came out. Not exactly on purpose. My schedule for the past year and a half has been nuts. I'm sure everyone on this panel can agree. But so the first one that came out was about 4 weeks ago. And what I had done was the serial that I had released through my newsletter, The Tribulations of Ross Young, Supernat PA, was so insanely popular that people kept asking me, will you bundle this? Will you bundle this? Will you bundle this? I'm like, guys, it's for free on the website. Here is the link. Go read it. And they kept asking, can you please bundle this? I want it on the Kindle. I'm like, okay, if you want to pay for it, I'll take your money. So I wrote a bonus chapter from the other MC's perspective, and I bundled it. It's got a very unique cover, as you can see. It's very bright and eye-catching. We had absolutely no intention of doing anything serious with this series at all, ever. So we did like individual covers for each one, and they're all in chibi form. And I mean, I have people who are demanding for that as stickers too. But basically what I did is I took all of those story prompts that have been going around on Tumblr and Facebook, and all the supernatural and paranormal ones where people are like, oh, someone should write a story about vampires doing a heist. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And that's all of what is Ross. It's just one story prompt after the next. It's one absurd situation after the next. And my main character is deadpan the entire time because he's been in customer service so long, nothing shocks him anymore. He's like, okay, all right, I'm going to sit here and drink my coffee and wait for you guys to figure this out. Cool. All right. It's fine. So that's Ross. It's, paperback, ebook, available on Amazon. No, I will not be doing an audiobook. I get that question a lot. No, I will not. The second book that just released, and that happened on the 11th, June 11th, is the second book of the series for Morton in general. And the first book of that series is what launched the A.J. Sherwood pen name. Fourth Point of Contact is book 1. And it's high fantasy. There's not magic in it. It reads more like a historical with a gay romance in the middle of it. So you've got my warden, who is a formal general, and he's just this happy-go-lucky person. He can talk a mile a minute, like motor mouth. And they trusted him to be the warden of a palace in a foreign country. And then you've got his opposite, who is also a general of that country. And he's got a heart of gold, but words are very difficult for him. So he just doesn't talk. He lets Ren do all the talking for him. And the two of them together are a really fun dynamic. I had an amazing amount of fun writing Fourth Point of Contact. I had just as much fun writing Zone. I was sad that I had to sit on Zone for 2 years because I was so busy releasing everything else, but I'm glad to finally have it out. And it's been doing pretty well. People seem to have really enjoyed the ride.
All right. And Sam.
Oh boy. I feel like a God man out. What I've been writing is absolute and utter fluff. It's not getting those reviews necessarily. I've actually been hearing it called some of the darkest thing I've ever written, but it's not really. I guess it's just because I'm the queen of fluff. They're like, oh, someone actually got hurt in this book, therefore it's super dark.
But did you burn someone alive?
I did not. I did, however, we killed someone in the very first scene of the very first book. So what we're working on, my co-writer Fox and I, are working on a series about a werewolf pack called Wolf Moon Rising. And basically it covers 4 months, give or take, in their existence, where about 20 years ago, a disease popped up and started killing a large portion of the people, and no one has figured out what's going on. And this sort of goes over the time period where they realize what's happening and why it's happening and start to turn things around. So it follows 4 different couples, so each book has a different one, and the 3rd one just came out, and when this comes out, the 4th one will probably be coming out pretty soon. We wrote them all at once, and then we're putting them all out really quickly, and it's kind of fried my brain. So frankly, I'm a little surprised I'm conscious for this at the moment. But yeah, that's us. We're I say that like Fox is in the room with me. But yes, we're in the process of a 4-book series that is coming out very quickly.
What was the idea behind it?
Honestly, it came from fluff, because for the last 1.5 years, both of us have been in this sort of mental place where we don't want to write super serious things. And we just want to read things that are a distraction from the real world, which is not at all fluffy lately. So we started with that, and then I get handed the first scene and I'm like, oh yeah, his father has to die. Let's do that on page. That's a great idea. So I did that, and now everyone's saying it's super dark for me because, someone actually got murdered. It might be a little dark for me.
That kind of leads into my next question, and I'll start with you, Jacki. Was there any part of the process that took you out of your comfort zone? If so, how do you think it impacted you?
With the current book, really the thing that was most difficult for me is this is the first time I've written a book about someone who was famous. And I didn't find that to be very enjoyable, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people talk about how they love, to read and write about celebrities, and I really don't like that. I had someone who said that's because you're like the queen of dates. Like, I love to write dates, and you can't write dates when it's someone who's famous. It's too difficult. I'm like, oh, they could go to the zoo. No, they can't go to the zoo. How about a baseball game? Well, maybe if they rent like one of the suites, then they could go. And so it really challenged me to find a way to show their relationship developing without being able to do it the way that I normally do. And so that was a bit of a challenge to try to figure out a way to really develop something between the two of them when they couldn't leave the apartment. It was a little hard.
All right. Shane, how about you?
I think trying to follow the cozy mystery rules as much as possible in a gay romantic mystery was harder with drag queens than I first anticipated. So I kind of threw out some of the rules. Like my queens have colorful language, and you don't usually find that in a cozy mystery. But mine definitely have some, some language. And I just plotting that type of mystery is so intricate and detailed, and just the time commitment in terms of working on other projects and other things that need to get done in life was, I think the biggest challenge with that was trying to keep track of all of the red herrings and all of the clues and making sure that they're all on page so that I'm not copying out by saying, oh no, the killer's this person. Oh, yeah, and I didn't show why or how, so I think that was the hardest thing for me because I had never done that before. And still keeping it, romantic and upbeat and fun. So, yeah.
All right, perfect. AJ.
Really the most challenging one for me was Ross. I'm used to writing and thinking along the terms of high fantasy. So Zone of Action was a piece of cake. It was no challenge whatsoever. But Ross was challenging in two different ways. The first was that it's a serial. I can't write short to save my life. So trying to get me down to like 12 pages, because that's basically what each section was somewhere around 12 to 15 pages, broke my brain on a regular basis. And of course, this thing was a monthly serial, so I had to have it done and edited and out the door the second Friday of every month. And it got a little bit easier as the year went on. Like I got kind of used to it, but there were also times where I would call up my editor and I'm like, I don't know. What am I supposed to be doing? Someone tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know. But, the other challenge of it was Ross is not serious. Ross is crack. And it's so ingrained, I think, in a lot of us that you have to have a certain plot. You have to have a certain theme. Like you're supposed to be doing a certain thing with a book. And there was none of that in Ross because it wasn't supposed to be connected. It was very episodic. And the only overall arching theme was the developing relationship between Ross and Glenn. And that was a very slow burn throughout the serial. And I finally had to give myself permission to write this thing like I would write a fan fiction. Don't try to be serious with it. Don't try to put a plot into it. Just let things be absurd and just have fun with it. And after that, it was a lot more relaxing, and I had put a lot of stuff in there that I probably shouldn't put in there because I was having too much fun. But that was kind of my challenge, was let go, just let things go, have fun with it. Writing to my id. I had to relearn how to write to my id all over again.
All right, perfect. Sam.
See, you guys all come up with fun things, and mine is actually something serious, which probably proves against my point that it was fluffy. One of the books in the series had a really serious subplot with a character who had been assaulted. And it was a really hard subject for us to cover while still being sensitive to other people who've been through this, and also trying to put things on page without being graphic or making the story about that. It was a very fine balance, and we worked very hard to try to keep it from being just all trauma all the time. That was probably the hardest thing my co-writer and I have ever worked on, honestly, because it was so deeply personal.
All right, thank you. And Frank.
Well, I mentioned one of them, which is trying to correlate between the two books and make sure that I said consistently the same thing in both books, written over a couple of years. But at the heart of the book, The Biker Who Got Bumped Off, is a trial. And this is the fifth book in this series. There have been 3 trials prior to this. And I'm sorry, there have been 2 trials prior to this. But Tom is a lawyer, and there's going to be mostly trials going forward. The series will go, this currently in 48, will go to like 58. And I didn't have a roadmap for how trials worked here. And there was a big change in Florida procedure in the 70s, like in most states, actually. So I actually had to go back and find a trial that happened at about the same time, that was presided by the same judge that I write about, because I read about a real judge, and piece it together. And what's interesting is that itself took a year, because I had to go through old archives of the newspaper. There's no extant files anywhere, because this county threw out all their stuff. It's a very Florida thing to throw things away, except in St. Augustine, where they keep everything, literally. But what I ended up doing was I pieced together this old trial, and which then led to the possibility that I might write a nonfiction that is about that trial, because it was a very significant event here that literally no one knows about. And the first thing, the significant thing is that it was the first time anyone Black was seated on a jury, and it caused a big kerfuffle. Mainly the county commissioners having to redraw the jury pool. They bitched and moaned about it in the newspaper, which was nice, because then I got to kind of see what the point of view was. And it was quite an arduous process. But so having to reconstruct how the trials worked was the goal of this book. And I didn't include everything, but now I have a template for going forward. But I want to throw in one other last little thing. In the other book, the contemporary one, it was a little bit of a challenge to think about how, if there were men alive in their 90s and 100s, and I've had practice writing about Ronnie, what would their points of view be today? And I wrote about one couple who, one of the guys is like 91 and the other one is, I think they're about both the same age, so like 91, 92. And one of them is a big, huge Trump supporter, which it's Florida, so that's kind of sort of a given. And the other person is just kind of like floating around, has no real politics, and is kind of famous for being just the most beautiful man in the world. So there was putting the two of them together and trying to like work that out and figure out how that would come together, and to be able to give honor, because I have a lot of trouble with the political position that one character takes, but to give honor to his position, to be able to respect him as a person, that was actually rather challenging. But I think I did it. I mean, I made it real clear that he had some very certain boundaries that he wanted to maintain. And while he was out, he wasn't out, which is its own little strange thing. So.
All right. My next question, and I'll start with you, Shane, is what do you do typically to research other than watching Angela Lansbury?
Magnum PI too. No. I mean, for these books, I've been an avid mystery reader. I mean, for a long time. Agatha Christie is like, I mean, I love Agatha Christie, and I read a lot of Agatha Christie plays, not books. I read plays for this one because I wanted, it was the dialogue that she writes that I really wanted to kind of capture, and I think that I get more of that from her plays, like Ten Little Indians, Mousetrap, that I really tried to make sure that I was kind of getting down in this third book, because it's a little bit of a homage, I think, to the Agatha Christie type of murder mystery in the third book. So I wanted to make sure that I was kind of capturing that correctly. And I got lost reading for quite some time and not writing, and then having to kind of come back to my manuscript after that and go back through and change most everything that I had written dialogue wise, because it was true to the first two books I wrote. It still had the same voice, but now I kind of wanted to make sure I kept that voice, but added a little bit more of the Agatha Christie tete-a-tete into it. So I rewrote with that thought in mind. And that was kind of for this book what I do. But the rest of it, I mean, it's life. I'm a gay guy. I'm super gay. I am my own pride parade. I write about, in my gay romances, my other mysteries. I mean, it all draws from my life, typically. You know, I mean, bad dates I've had, good dates I've had, situations that I've been in or my friends have been in that I get their, you know, usually not they're okay to write about it. But, you know, like I find I draw from life, and most of my other books, even the tropiest, most hallmarkish book series that I write, it still comes from some nugget of reality that either I experienced or someone I know has.
All right, thank you. AJ.
You know, I spend far too much time on Google Earth, to be honest with you. Especially with the paranormal and urban fantasies, we are constantly looking at Google Earth and looking at train routes and planes, and you know, how long does it take to drive this, which is a better route. For Scales and Spells especially, because it's all based in Europe, Jocelyn and I are basically living on Google Earth while we're plotting the book, and then we have to double check ourselves all the time. So, far too much time on Google Earth. But other than that, I typically read a lot. I've got a whole bookcase full of reference books, and they're dictionaries of all different languages. They're history books. I've got a couple of different books like body trauma, where I can actually look up to see, okay, if you do X to this character, then how long does it take for them to heal? What kind of treatment do they need? You know, what kind of expectations can you give them on mobility in the next chapter? And it's all kind of ties back to how much I can look up in the books. But I also really depend upon my beta readers. I've got people who are from all walks of life, who have all different types of careers. I'm very lucky to have a couple who are actually in like legal positions, and they're in law enforcement. So when I get to the procedural parts, I can, if I can't look it up easily, which you can't always do that, I can always ask one of them, go, can I do this? And usually the answer is no, but what are you trying to do? And I try not to spoil it for them too bad, but I give them, like, you know, this is a scenario, what can I do? And they'll give me some kind of a workaround. But it's kind of a collection of things, but yeah, I Google a lot. I don't know how we wrote anything before Google, to be honest with you.
Agreed.
Reference librarians.
Yeah, true. All right, Sam, how about you?
This whole conversation actually reminds me of my husband and I were out this weekend and we saw a train and we got to talking about what might be on it. And I told him, because I wrote a Western last year, you know, if it was 1875, I could probably tell you, but I have no idea. So yes, I know a lot about trains in 1875, but for this series specifically, there's been a surprising amount of biology. Because when you invented a disease, you have to know how it works and what's going on in the background before you can go and cure it. So we spent a lot of time on biology for this particular series. Also, inventing a small town, always fun. So again, like AJ said, Google Earth is your friend. and of course, once again, without the internet, I know research librarians, but I would be living in a library. with as much research as I end up doing for these. It's so convenient to just be able to open up Google and be like, where were the train routes in 1875? So yeah, all over the place, but mostly there's a lot of Google in my life.
All right, Frank.
Well, before I reply, I just wanted to do a shout out to what Shane said about Agatha Christie, and specifically the dialogue in Witness for the Prosecution. Is because I don't think she does as well in her books, to be honest. I think she does much better when she's writing for plays, because it's a lot tighter. And Witness for the Prosecution is a movie that everyone should see if you like mysteries. I highly recommend it, or procedurals. It's a great, anyway, I needed to say that because I was like, wait, that's like, and I just love that you did that. So research is what that's what I do. I write historicals, and I spend a lot of time on newspaper archives and old train schedules that I've pilfered from eBay and things like that. But I want to talk real quick about my great nemesis, which is football, because in my contemporary series, Wit owns a fictional NFL franchise in San Antonio. So I have my brother and two of my readers who are my like brain trust. And what I finally figured out to do was to like, because Eddie, who is me essentially, is the narrator. So he can only see and hear and listen and understand the same things that I can. So I'll go to my little brain trust and ask them questions, and they'll tell me, and I'll be like, I don't understand any of that. And then I'll use the fact that I don't understand it. So my research is actually, I'm researching my own ignorance. And it's not so much about the game of football, but it's the business. And I actually do now know a lot about the business of football, but I'm still completely mystified by the draft. I have really no clue as to how that works. And I've used that a couple of times in my stories, because Eddie's just like, don't talk to me about this. Like, I just want you to get whoever you need, et cetera, et cetera. So one mistake I made though in this arena is that I decided that the easiest thing to do, because I broke the rules by having these expansion teams, they would never happen. But I decided I needed to tie the Matadors to a specific team. And I was like, well, why not tie them to the team that it's closest to, the Texans? Tragically, however, the Texans had a really, and I don't even know anything about this, but they had a terrible year. So in the last two books, I've had to write about basically Wit moping around like, maybe we should just close the franchise. Maybe we should not do this anymore because our team sucks. Because the Texans, unfortunately, did really badly.
They always suck.
Well, yes, but they overly sucked. So I'm like trying to figure out, should I like tie them to the Browns? I'm trying to figure out who to switch schedules
Oh, no.
with. Yeah, right, exactly. That would be worse.
That's football.
Yeah, exactly. No, I've now literally said everything I know about football. So there you go. Anyway, that's how I work. So, but research is the core of everything I do. And when I start a book, I start by reading the paper, Life magazine, Time magazine, and National Geographic from that time period to kind of figure out what's going on in the zeitgeist. So,
Oh, perfect. Jacki.
For this one, it was mostly, I said I probably landed myself on like a watch list of some kind. I spent a lot of time,
we're all on that same list.
We're all on the list, yeah.
I spent a lot of time Googling the impact of car bombs on structures of parking garages and things like that, which probably don't go over real well. So that would be, like the Google type research. I also went to a local gun show and handled a lot of different types of guns and holsters to see how the guns like went in the holsters, how they came out of the holsters, where the holsters would fit, and what, that whole kind of thing. And that was an interesting experience. To go to a gun show in West Texas was a little different. But, it was, I I wanted to at least, have some kind of an idea, how the things would fit and where they would be worn and how things would go in and out of the holsters and that kind of thing in particular. So I did that. And honestly, it was less research than a lot of the books that I've done. I have a couple that have witches in them, some paranormal books with witches. And those were really, really research intensive because I know more right now about crystals than I ever thought I would know in my life, and herbs and potions and just all of it. Like that was like a big, deep rabbit hole I fell right into. Had a lot of fun there actually, but.
All right. So my next question is, start with AJ. What's something about being a published author that surprised you? Looking at it now from the inside, if you were talking to your previous pre-published self, what surprised you the most when you got behind the curtain?
How much time I spend on marketing. Holy crap, I did not anticipate that. But then I was one of the first waves, because I have two pen names, where when Amazon first announced that they were doing self-publishing and that you could put a book in their system, I was one of the first waves of people to do that. And in those days, Amazon was really nice. They would advertise for you. And they were trying to make sure that their new gimmick worked. I'm sure that was the reason why. So for the first 3 years, I didn't really advertise and I didn't really need to. Like the books were taking off by themselves. I didn't have to do much. And then all of a sudden that stopped without warning. It was not nice. And I've been kind of scrambling ever since to figure out this whole advertising thing. I found a lot of things that have worked over the years, but I'm still hitting my head against the wall going, social media, how do you effectively advertise on social media? And no one seems to know the answer. So I'm beginning to think that this is like a unicorn that we're all trying to halter and ride. And I don't think anyone's actually managed to find the unicorn yet. But yeah, advertising was the thing that I did not see coming. The other thing I didn't see coming was contracts. I was in a better situation than most on that just because I'm a paralegal. That was my degree. So I know how to read the legalese, but oh my gosh, I'm sure you guys have all dealt with contracts at certain points because you've got contracts for the photography models, for narrators, for any distribution that you do. Like there's just a lot of contracts. And it's gotten to the point now where if someone tells me, I want to be an author, and I'm like, okay, these are the college classes you have to take notes. Because these are the ones that you don't think to take. You have to take bankruptcy law, contracts, and social media, and business.
And none of them are on writing. None of the classes.
None of them are on writing. But if you don't have that knowledge, you sink like a ship that's rat infested. Yeah, it's always a business end. And it's hard for us creative types because we're like, just let us write. We want to write. But you literally have to think about things on the business sense too.
All right, Sam.
Well, I'm sure you'll be shocked to hear this, but I completely agree with AJ because that's, America's got this notion of the writer as this great tortured soul who sits around and drinks whiskey and, manages to write a few hundred words a day. And their lives are so hard, mostly because, their lives are hard. So it's sort of this recursive thing. But no, the writing is actually the fun part that we all get in and we want to do. And then there's this whole added portion that's like, you have to learn ads and you have to learn social media and you have to learn how to run a newsletter. And none of us are really suited to any of that because we're all these, like, most of us are introverts and we want to sit around and tell pretty stories. And then it's like, no, you can do that, but now you're done with that for now. And you have to do the rest of this stuff. So that's definitely it. There is much less whiskey than I was led to believe. That's all I'm saying.
All right, Frank.
Well, actually, I'm going to strike a different note, although I agree with everything that was said. But the thing that surprised me the most was all the people I get to meet. that was not at all what I was expecting. I thought I'd write a book and like maybe 1 or 2 people would like it. And then I have people all of a sudden asking to like, can I come and meet you? And like, can we have coffee? And can I interview you? And I'm like, oh, sure, whatever. And that completely surprised me, because I guess I thought, like Sam was saying, like I was going to sit in my garret and like smoke cigarettes and type on my typewriter, on my Underwood typewriter, by the way. And then that's all I would do. But it's interesting because the production part of it, it's like I was training my entire life. I've been like, self-publishing is a skill I didn't know I had until I started doing it. So on the production side, I can do everything, which is amazing. And then the advertising is, well, it's its own unicorn. That's exactly the right word. It's a unicorn. But just meeting people, that's just been astonishing to me. But the number of people that I know, that I knew before I started writing, who care about my books is probably somewhere around this number. Because they're like, I don't know you as an author. Like, I don't get this. I don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, well, I have 80 books published. Like, I've been kind of busy. And they're like, oh, yeah. But let's talk about this other thing. I'm like, oh, okay. And that's always very surprising to me, that like the prophet is not without honor except in his own home, that kind of thing. It's what it feels like sometimes. But yeah, it's just, but I've met so many amazing people by writing and hearing from readers and being asked to talk about what I do and all that good stuff. It's been wonderful. That part I love.
Perfect. Jackie.
Well, I actually come from a marketing and human resources background. So that part of it wasn't as much a surprise to me as maybe it was to some people. Like, I kind of knew that was going to be a big part of it. But for me, it was more a twofold thing. One, it never occurred to me how little time I would have to actually read. Like, I became a writer because I'm a reader, right? Like, I was, seriously, like a 2-book-a-day reader. Like, I read like some people do drugs, like it was like my addiction. And now, I'm lucky if I, get 2 books a week, which is, yeah. I know a lot of people consider that to be a fair amount, but that's like a little bit for me. So I didn't realize how little I would have time to read. The other is, unlike what Sam said, I'm like an extrovert to like the nth degree. Like, I am the polar opposite of an introvert. And it's kind of a solitary profession. Other than those occasional things like what Frank was talking about, where like you get to meet somebody and that's really cool. Like, I'm here in my house all day by myself, and that's very different for me. That's never been my thing. I've always worked in a really high traffic, busy, interacting with a lot of people all day kind of a career. So that has been the biggest. I don't regret it. I'm glad that I'm here at home all day and I get to write all day. I didn't like going to work all day and trying to squeeze in a couple of hours of writing at night. I didn't like that, but I do miss people, to be honest. I'm one of those rare ones who like, I'm ready to get back out in the world. I miss everybody.
All right, Shane.
Jackie and I will be seeing a lot of each other at GRL. When I first started writing, there's a lot that I, of course, wished I had known, and the marketing and the advertising and all of that, most definitely. But I would have loved to have known when I published my first 3 books and I was putting like a book out a year, that I actually had community and a tribe, because I was an island completely alone. I did not know that romance existed. I read a lot of gay fiction, but I had no idea that was what I was writing, really. I just thought I was writing LGBT general fiction that happened to be a romance. And then I did the Criminal Delights series. Someone had read my first book, which was not dark really at all. It was a drag queen paranormal mystery, and that was actually pretty autobiographical at the time for me. And they asked if I would want to do this, and I was like, yeah. And all of a sudden, I learned there was all these other people kind of doing what I was doing, and I didn't know there were Facebook groups. I didn't know there were. I mean, I had no idea about anything. So these amazing women that Sharita Lira especially really took me under their wing, and I mean, what they taught me was like a crash course masters in 6 months of kind of working with them and all that. And I just wish I would have known about all that earlier, because being an island is really lonely, and writing is already a lonely enough thing. But now I have a community that is incredibly supportive and friendly and kind and compassionate, and for the most part almost always there for each other. And I wished I would have known about that 3 years earlier, because I feel like I missed out.
Yeah, Shane, I'm really with you on that one, because I was the same way. I wrote fan fiction for years without any knowledge that was a genre that I could actually buy books. Shock.
I know, that alone made my head explode. I was like,
right?
What?
And then when I released Fourth Point of Contact, I didn't expect other authors to come and talk to me or be supportive or anything, because that wasn't my experience underneath my other pen name. I couldn't get anyone to say boo to me. And all of a sudden I had people sharing my release and saying congratulations. I'm like, I love all of you. I don't know who you are, but I love you.
Be my friend.
Right? It's been such an amazing experience writing on this side of things, just because the community support is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, finding the community has been enormous. And I'm the introvertiest introvert. I haven't left my house in a week, and I'm happy that way. But I love having people to actually talk to about what we all like and read and write.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. But before we go, I'm going to go around again and tell people where they can find you on the internet. And I'll start with you, Sam.
I'm relatively easy to find, usually on Facebook, where I'm Sam Burns. I have a website, burnswrites.com. I'm on Twitter, technically, but I wouldn't look for me there if I were you. And then, of course, all of my books are on Amazon. There are a whole lot of them these days. Just Sam Burns everywhere you look.
All right, Frank.
Well, it's easy to find me. Just Google Frank W. Butterfield. I'm the only one there is. And you find my books. I'm on Facebook. And if you like pictures of the beach, I'm on Instagram. And yeah, and send me an email. I love to hear from people.
All right. Jacki.
You can find my webpage at jackijames.com. I'm on Facebook also as Jacki James. I have a Facebook group. It's called Jacki's Rule Breakers. I love to have people join my group. And I'm Amazon, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere is Jacki James. That's pretty much it. I have a TikTok account, but I don't make videos because I'm not brave. But I'm there. You can find me.
All right, Shane.
My Facebook group, Shane's Sweet and Salty Readers, is where I live the most in terms of social media. Shane Morton author on Instagram, I think Twitter, and TikTok too, because I just joined. What was it, Jacki? 2 nights ago?
2 nights ago.
Yeah, 2 nights ago. I have no videos up, but I have plans.
All right, and finally, AJ.
So all of my books are, of course, on Amazon. I actually have put some of my audiobooks on BookFunnel. If you guys want to try BookFunnel, the links for that are on my website. It's ajsherwood.com. And I do have Instagram. I don't ever use it, but I have it. Same thing for Twitter. I have it. I don't ever use it. But I am on Facebook quite a bit. And then I have my own group, AJ Sherwood's Gentlemen. you're welcome to find me there.
All right. And I want to thank everyone again for participating and everyone for watching. And we'll see you next time. Bye.